You're listening to The South Stands, a Buckeye football podcast by Ohio State fans for Ohio State fans on Apple Podcasts, YouTube, Spotify, and SoundCloud. Welcome back to The South Stands, a Buckeye football podcast by Ohio State fans for Ohio State fans from the West Coast. I'm your host, Zach Moore. Today is Thursday, November 4th, and I'm very happy to be joined once again by fellow South Stands contributor Paige Van Horn from Denver. PVH, how's that first Heineken going down, my friend?
It's really, really good. I couldn't hold off to crack it so we could have it on the pod, but it's delicious. So thanks for asking.
Wonderful. I'm glad you're enjoying that. We are also joined by our fellow contributor, Chad Plummer from Cleveland. CP, what's the word from the 216?
216, all good, boys. Just long day at the office, ready to talk some Buckeye football.
All right, man. Well, we're happy to have you. A long day for me. Actually, my work day is still ongoing, but I'm squeezing this pod in here while it happens. So, of course, we are here. We are here today to preview number 5 Ohio State's matchup with Nebraska in Lincoln this coming Saturday. But before we dive into that, gents, we didn't really have a time or an opportunity as a group to talk about Ohio State's 33-24 win over Penn State last Saturday. Now, our listeners already know where I stand on that result from Tuesday's pod. Paige, I want to start with you. Was Penn State a good win for the Buckeyes in your estimation?
I think so. I mean, I think you'll look back on it, and I said it over text. It might not be as dramatic, but depending on how their season plays out, like that Illinois game reminded me of our Iowa game or Purdue game. That is just a complete head scratcher. Like you just can't figure out what the hell happened there. And especially coming off a bye, but maybe Clifford was still hurt. I think the other sort of question was, do they pass the eye test? I'm sorry, dude, that defense is legit.
Yes.
That secondary, those guys are very good. Their linebackers are very good. Mm-hmm. I don't know what was going on with their D line versus our offensive line, if that was coaching or scheme or whatever the case may be, but they just lined up and, kind of punched us in the mouth, and that wasn't a fluke. It just wasn't. No. How they lost that game to Illinois, I'll never understand it. But to answer your question, I do think it was a great win. And then what's frustrating is that should have been a top 10 win for us, and it wasn't because they laid that egg against Illinois.
Yep.
And I also think it's, I was thinking about, was that just like the greatest troll ever by Franklin,
totally,
by referring us to Illinois and the horseshoe, and he's totally distracted, right?
Yeah.
And did that manipulate the line 3 or 4 point or something?
Might have.
Like that? I mean, so I predicted it to be close. You
did,
like you said on the pod, I didn't think it would be that close.
Right.
But then again, I'm not that surprised.
Yeah.
What surprises me is that they lost that game to Illinois. I think, that's a good team. When Clifford's healthy, they're dangerous, and they could beat just about anybody in the country.
Yeah. Chad, what do you think? Was that a good win for the Buckeyes in your estimation?
I mean, the way I look at it, any win is a good win. I honestly thought, obviously history tells us that they play us tough. It's always a game. But I honestly thought, that we were going to blow them out.
Yeah.
So, but you got to give Clifford some cred, man. He played a good game.
He was.
And their defense,
good.
Like Paige said, he stepped up. Yeah, he balled out. I think there was some things that, our offensive line didn't look good at all.
They didn't.
And they spoke about that in his press conference. But, I think the D came up with some pretty good plays at times. And, but yeah, obviously I picked a blowout.
Right.
That didn't happen. And I was like, I don't like going into that fourth quarter, man. Like, come on, man. Let's, I don't need this shit. So, but yeah, man, I thought, the offense had some, they executed well, and there was a couple times they didn't look like what we've seen the last couple of weeks. I've got to give some props to Trey. He was patient, man. He was getting stuck, and then ended up getting 158 yards. So, I mean,
that's right. 152 on 28 carries. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. Right. Yeah. Right. So, I mean, it's a game that I think that we needed, that, coming down to the wire. So, I think that's going to play a little bit, in how we, look at things moving forward.
I agree with you on Henderson in particular. I said on Tuesday's pod that I thought this was really his first introduction to Big Ten football. Late October, a meaningful game, a lot at stake for Ohio State. And look, the going was not easy for him early on. Penn State was frustrating him. It would have been easy for a young player to get frustrated and pack it in. And I give him credit for his maturity. He didn't do that. He stuck with it. And as you pointed out, CP, 152 yards on 28 really tough carries. And, he had the big run, the big 68-yard run that set up, was able to give Ohio State a little cushion, right? They were eventually able to push it in. Yeah, there were some concerns in the red zone, right? Only converting 1 touchdown in 6 visits to the Penn State red zone. Now, I read during the week that Penn State was doing some things schematically with their defensive front. They were changing up their looks before the snap. I think one of the X and O's gurus that I read, I listen to.
I think it was Bill Landis.
Landis was really good. He's very good at breaking things down. Ross Fulton is another guy from Buckeye Scoop. But the before and after picture that the Ohio State offensive line was getting from the Penn State defensive front was confusing them in their blocking assignments. They go with that zone blocking scheme, and Penn State was able to do things pre-snap to kind of screw that up. And then, they were bringing their linebackers in from different angles and stuff. So they did a really good job of kind of junking it up front, because Ohio State definitely had the advantage there. I don't think that's one of Penn State's better defensive lines. But as you pointed out, Paige, that back seven, I don't know, man, they looked the part, right? I mean, those dudes look like NFL players, linebacker all the way to the secondary.
Yeah, 3 or 4 of them for sure.
Yeah.
I mean, Joey Porter Jr., right? I mean, we know that guy can play. So I actually have a question for you.
Yeah.
This is a classic Juanism, but we were talking on Sunday after the game. I was like, so this is a question for you guys. Is this a reset expectations game for you guys? Meaning, I think we all thought Ohio State was clearly the number 2 team in the country going into this game.
Right.
Do we still feel that way coming out of this game?
Yeah. I had to ruminate on this for a while. I had to think about, really kind of sit with this result for a while to arrive at where I did, which is I think this was a good quality win for Ohio State. I think if you look at Penn State's resume, and we didn't know this until the playoff rankings were released on Tuesday night, but Penn State has wins over the committee's number 13 in Auburn and number 21 in Wisconsin. That game was on the road. So you consider what they're capable of when they're whole, when they're healthy, and then the impact of the Clifford injury. And Paige, you've already said it. This should have been a top 10 win for Ohio State. So I'm going to say no. I think there's some things that could have gone better. I still think this team is ascending. I still think there's room for an improvement, and I'm expecting improvement. And I think these remaining 4 games is going to provide them tests, really good tests that are going to allow them to really grow. So no, I have not reset my expectations based on this result. I still see Ohio State as one of the top 2 or 3 teams in the country. I expect them to make the playoff and compete for a national championship. Chad, how about you?
I agree with you, Z. It blows my mind that, I mean, I know we're going to get into that here in a little bit, but I think I mentioned something on that. Like Penn State, I feel could beat every one of those teams without problem in the bottom half of that, first, playoff rankings, the top 20.
Right.
But
I was surprised they didn't make the rankings, by the way. I thought, if you're going to put Wisconsin in, how is Penn State on there? In Iowa too? I mean, Penn State should have killed. They would have killed Iowa.
How does that work?
Yeah, I don't know, but I was surprised they weren't. I mean, because I think they're better than Wisconsin, Iowa, and Minnesota, who are all ranked by the College Football Playoff Committee. Paige? So how did you answer that question from Juan?
I'm not quite as bullish as you are. I'm sort of like, okay, I need to see another game. And I think this weekend will be an interesting game.
Yes.
Against Nebraska. So I'm kind of hedging on that. Right. I do think part of me, I thought we all were, we were all super, super excited going into this and a blowout. And yeah, we are definitely a force and we're going to make the playoff and we're, should be the 2 seed. I don't think I can say that now. It's how I felt before that game. So, I wouldn't say it's a complete reset expectation, but I do think it gives me some pause, and I'd like to see how they respond this week before, the last 3 games of the season to say, no, I still think this is one of the best teams in the country. And, I'll take my chances against anybody.
I disagree. I think this game is something that we needed to happen. Obviously the loss to Oregon, but like Penn State, you go back over the Zach, the last 8 years and look at like the matchups. I mean, I think maybe once or twice there's been like a blowout, or not like a blowout, but like a significant gap in the final score.
Right.
But I do think we're a top 4 team. I actually took the time. I'll be honest with you, I really hadn't watched most of the other teams. I've watched that Georgia-Florida game. I've seen Alabama play. Oregon, God, I would love to play those guys again. We'd smack the shit out of those guys. And Affleck. But yeah, I honestly think we are. I mean, that offense is like, I still believe it's one of the best in the country. And I think the defense is just getting better and better each week.
Okay. So, Chad, you and I still pretty bullish on the Buckeyes. Paige, you need to see a little bit more. That's totally fair. Why don't we move ahead and have a look at Ohio State at Nebraska? The game is a noon Eastern kick on Fox. The line, as you've already referenced, Chad, is Ohio State minus 15. Now, at first glance, that's a pretty low number. I think we'd all agree. The over-under is 66. Nebraska comes into this game losers of 5 of their last 6, which includes, now listen to this, and I think this is why the line is only 15, a 7-point road loss to number 8 Oklahoma, a 3-point road loss to Michigan State, a 3-point home loss to number 7 Michigan, a 7-point road loss to number 20 Minnesota. And just last Saturday, the Huskers fell to a pretty solid Purdue team at home, 28-23. So while Nebraska sits at 3-6, overall those results would seem to suggest that Ohio State is in for a fight on Saturday in Lincoln. They've been very competitive with some quality opponents. I mean, number 8 Oklahoma, number 3 Michigan State, number 7 Michigan, and number 20 Minnesota. These are all teams those are their current rankings in the college football playoff standings right now. And Nebraska played all of those teams very, very tough within one score, had a chance to win all 4 of those games. I want to throw a couple numbers at you here, guys, and then I want to go around the horn and get your concernometer scores for this game. Well, we're going to fire up the concernometer for the first time this season. Nebraska comes into this game 17th nationally in total offense, averaging 469 yards per game. 17th nationally. It's pretty potent offense, at least in terms of yards. The Huskers are 21st in offensive yards per play, averaging 6.68 yards per play. But they're only 58th in scoring offense. And they've not been good in the red zone. They're all the way down at 98th in red zone offense. So this is an offense, it would seem, that can rack up big yardage, between the 30s, but they've had trouble punching it in when they get to the red zone. Of course, their offense, as we all know, revolves around the 4th-year starting quarterback, Adrian Martinez. Man, it seems like he's been there forever. And the other thing too is, you remember Taylor Martinez, their other quarterback that played, for back in the late 2010s. So it seems like they've had a guy named Martinez, running the plays for him, for 20 years. But in Adrian Martinez's case, it's been only 4 years. He's a 4-year starter, and he's probably having his best season. He's 3rd in the conference in passing at 252 yards a game. He's completing 62.5% of his passes. He's thrown 12 touchdown passes. He's also Nebraska's leading rusher. He's got 451 yards rushing on the season and 11 rushing touchdowns. So he's the sun, moon, and the stars of that Nebraska offense. Now, ironically, Martinez is also probably the biggest reason the Huskers are 3-6. Instead of 6-3, because his untimely turnovers have absolutely killed the Huskers, which rank 94th nationally in turnover margin. So, for example, his interception in the first period of overtime against Michigan State allowed Sparty to kick the game-winning field goal in that one. His fumble deep in Nebraska territory late in the 4th quarter in a tie game against Michigan allowed the Wolverines to win that game, kicking the game-winning field goal late in that one. And then last week in the loss to Purdue, Martinez threw 4 back-breaking interceptions. The other thing is Nebraska's not been really good at protecting him. They're 97th nationally in sacks allowed. Martinez has been sacked 22 times this season. By comparison, CJ Stroud's only been sacked 5 times. So there are issues there turning the ball over and protecting Martinez that I think, that's something to pay attention to for Ohio State going into this game. One last player on offense I want to mention. Samori Toure is 7th in the Big Ten in receiving, a pretty good wide receiver for them. He's right behind Chris Olave, 7th in the Big Ten, 29 receptions for 568 yards. He's averaging almost 20 yards per reception, so that's a name to remember. Samori Toure is his name. Real quick on the defense. Nebraska, not bad.
Samori Toure.
Not bad on defense. I mean, especially relative to some of these other Nebraska defenses we've seen under Scott Frost. 44th nationally in total defense. 50th against the run, averaging 137 yards per game. 46th against the pass at 211 yards per game. They're 22nd in defensive yards per play, allowing just under 5 yards per play. Now, the PFF grades for Nebraska's pass rush, 57th nationally, so above average. Now, they're only 82nd nationally in sacks, so they aren't getting home to the quarterback all that often, but they are getting decent pressure, according to PFF. They're 44th nationally in tackles for loss. They're 34th nationally in interceptions with 8 on the season. So on the whole, this is a better than average defense, statistically speaking. So, and again, much better than Cornhusker defenses of the past under Frost. So Paige, I know you said earlier this week you had an uneasy feeling about this game. So why don't you tell us how you see this one and give us your Concernometer score?
Yeah, I mean, I think I was probably a 7, and now that I heard those numbers, I might be a 10. It just worries. And you know what else worries me about this?
Yeah, go ahead.
Scott Frost really needs this game.
Yeah, he does.
He really, really needs it. And this, if he gets this game, then he's fine, right?
Right.
I mean, there's all kinds of chatter about, Trev Alberts. God, thank God we don't have to listen to him on TV anymore. But, what are they going to do? And I don't know. I just have a bad feeling in my gut about this.
Oh boy. Okay.
The Scott Frost angle. I think we're going to talk about the next. This could be a hangover game for us. Is before we, and it also could be a look ahead game for us. By the way, with the next 3 games coming up, and then the noon start.
11 a.m. local time, by the way.
Yeah,
a sleepy 11 a.m. kick.
Yeah, none of that speaks well to me. Now, on the flip side, we absolutely own Nebraska. Mm-hmm. But the other thing, like the turnovers, right? Like if that narrative plays out, and that's been a huge narrative in the games that we've played against them, right? They just have these just awful turnovers that are backbreakers, right? If that narrative doesn't play out, I think this is actually a close game, and I think it's going to roll into the fourth quarter, and we're going to be freaking out again. And so,
so what's your final Concernometer score on this one? What's the readout?
I'm an 8. I'm going with an
8. Okay. Oh, those are. I mean, hey, a lot of what you said there is real. Those are things to pay attention to.
The other thing I was just looking, they end with us, then at 21 Wisconsin, at 22 Iowa. That has got to be about the hardest schedule in the country, I would imagine.
Yeah. I mean, adding Oklahoma in the non-conference is pretty brutal. And the crossover games they have with the Big Ten East. Yes. Getting Ohio State it's been brutal for them. State. Yeah, totally. Wow. Chad, how about you? Give us your view on this game and a Concernometer score.
Tell me I'm wrong, Daddy.
Well, I'm about to, man, because I'm not going to fall into that bullshit with Scott Frost. You know what? I mean, I like the guy. It just seems like he's just getting beaten down, man. Some of those games they should have won, and he's got to be bummed. He goes back to his alma mater and he's just getting kicked in the teeth, every week. And I'm not going to let this turn into one of those Purdue games where the kid, and God bless his soul, but the kid had cancer and then we lost the game. I'm not going to be doing that bullshit. You know what I mean? But here's what I think. I think that, obviously Vegas knows something. I mean, that's just crazy, 15 points, but it isn't, it's in Nebraska. Mm-hmm. But I don't think there's going to be a hangover. I don't think Dave's going to let him go there. Everything I was reading and listening to, like the offensive line, they have come together as a unit this week. They know they really dropped the ball last week. I don't see it being, my concern meter is about a 3.5.
3.5 for you. Okay.
As far as that, there's no way. I'm not going to say no way, but we're not losing this game. But I will say this, whether we cover the line or not, but I actually think we will. I think we win this game, by 20 plus points.
Okay. All right. So you're a 3.5. We'll get to your score prediction here in a second. 3.5 for you. So
okay.
not all that concerned. I've got it at a 4.5. I'm a little nervous about I'm a little nervous about our linebackers against a pretty good Nebraska rushing attack, which ranks 28th nationally. Funny enough, that's just ahead of Ohio State. They average
without Steel Chambers.
Well, right, exactly. So that's where I was going with this. You've got a very, very athletic, slippery running quarterback in Martinez, who actually can pop off a big play. This is a guy, you give him a crease, he can go 50, 60 yards on you. And Paige, you've just pointed it out. Yeah. Steel Chambers are going to be serving a targeting suspension for the first half. And what does that leave? Taraja Mitchell stinks. I was looking at the PFF grades. Of the 55 Buckeyes that have logged snaps on defense this season, Mitchell's 52nd. Cody Simon, he hasn't been much better, 44th. Funny enough, Tommy Eichenberg, of all people, he's 23rd out of the 55 Buckeye defenders that have logged snaps so far this season, according to PFF. Steel Chambers is 8th. He's a difference maker for him. You know what I could see coming out of this game? Steel Chambers sits out the first half. Ohio State gets has a really rough time with the Nebraska running game, containing Martinez. Chambers comes in, makes a huge difference off the bench in the second half, and we might see him as a starter going forward. I could totally see that as a storyline coming out of this game. I hope that's not how it plays out, because that means we struggle, and I'm sweating bullets here watching the game in a bad mood. But I could totally see that coming out of this game. Now, our defensive line has been really good of late, and overall the Buckeyes' run defense is much improved. We're now up to number 16 nationally against the run. And but to be fair, we've not seen a running threat like Martinez since the Oregon game, when frankly we had a little trouble with Anthony Brown. You remember, boys? You guys were there. He didn't go over 100 yards on us, but he had some timely design runs. I think he ran 10 times for 65 yards, and he had a few runs were very frustrating, right, to help keep the chains moving for Oregon. Well, I think Martinez is a bit of a different animal running the football. So I am nervous about that one aspect of the game. But overall, 4.5 on the concernometer for me.
Isn't it usually like when we've got that, when we're just on the opposite spectrums of Van Gummy, that he's got a concernometer of above a 7, that usually works out in our favor. So I hope we're following along the same.
I should have been tracking that. That's definitely a stat that we should be tracking.
Right. Yeah. Advanced analytics. That's not on. I think it's on Pro Football Focus. If you go look, it's kind of buried in there somewhere. But...
It's into the premium stats. That's an extra $15 a month. I can't afford that.
I will say though, I'm really surprised that like Nebraska is they're averaging what? I know you probably said this earlier, Zach, but 470.1 yards per game. That's pretty impressive. We're 547, So
it is. The difference with them is that it's all between the 30s, it seems, and they don't quite have the they don't have the big play capability that we do, and they've had trouble in the red zone. They just can't punch it in the red zone. But yeah, you got to respect them though. You got to respect an offense that can move the ball like that. You got to tackle well in this game.
That's funny you say that, Z. What do you guys think about our red zone offense, man? I'm not quite like feeling too warm and fuzzy about that shit.
Yeah. Well, we were going back and forth over email about this earlier this week, and I'm not ready to call that a concern yet, because, it was just a 1-game sample size. I know we had a little bit of trouble finishing drives against Oregon, but there was only one in the red zone that we didn't finish, which was a fourth down that we couldn't convert. So I'm not quite ready to go there, but I'm definitely going to keep an eye on it. I don't know. So you see it as a concern, Chad?
Okay.
You're concerned about that?
Well, it's just, I wouldn't say I'm actually, it's just a little bit puzzling to me at times, with the play calling in the red zone. I just sometimes I can't figure out, why we made this call at a certain.
Yeah.
I feel like we need to get Rucker into the red zone play a little bit more somehow.
Yeah.
So do you guys I didn't mean to interrupt you, Chad, but do you guys watch the Monday?
No, you're good, babe.
The Monday Night Football with Peyton and Eli?
I watched a little bit of it a couple weeks ago.
But I heard it's funny shit.
It's really funny. And so I haven't watched much of it, but on this week I was watching it, and I don't even remember who the two teams were, but it was 4th down and goal, and they had tried to just run the ball literally from the 1 yard line up the gut. Mm-hmm. And Peyton literally called it. He's like, just run the play action, release the tight end. It's wide open every time. And sure enough, the team did it. And sure enough, it was wide open. And sure enough, it was a touchdown. Right. And it was like, to your point, Chad, right?
Where was that? Right. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Well, was Marshawn Lynch on there that night when they said, right. "Oh, hey, would you throw the ball or run the ball there, Marshawn?"
Yeah.
That was funny.
But yeah, and I think Day just thought, hey, we can just slam it down their throats, and clearly that wasn't happening. And in one of the pieces that Bill Landis wrote, he was talking about 2-point conversions, and I was like, that's a weird thing to be like writing an article about. And then he tied it in very nicely to our struggles down against Penn State. And I think Ryan Day's creativity just went completely out of the window. Like, there's no way that we can't just push these guys off the line and score a 1 yard touchdown. And clearly we couldn't do it.
Right.
And I think, lesson learned for Ryan Day.
Yeah. Yeah. I thought against a defense like that, you might be able to impose your will in that situation against Maryland. Or even maybe against Rutgers, but against Penn State, you do have to get creative down there. And especially when you got good linebackers, because Oregon had a really good linebacker who dominated the game. His name escapes me now, but he was a 5-star and he was great in that game for them. And I think you have to be a little bit more inventive down there. Play action at the tight end is one thing. If CJ Stroud were a little more willing to run, that might help as well. But I just don't think that is not in his DNA. But that's part of what we were able to use with Justin Fields, the threat of his legs in the red zone situations to be more efficient down there. But when you don't have the threat of a running quarterback, I think that limits you a little bit. Maybe you look to get guys on your speed, use your speed on the outside, but yeah, they could have been more creative play calling wise for sure than just trying to line up and depend on your offensive linemen to win your one-on-one matchups, what they struggled to do in that game.
I read a stat that Nebraska, they've been an underdog by 15 points or more one time this year. They covered the spread. They've covered the spread 4 out of 9 times this year. So about 50%. So we'll see.
Okay. All right.
I don't know, man. I bet a lot of people are going to make this as a sucker bet, and a lot of people are going to put money on the Buckeyes and probably end up losing.
Yeah.
You never know.
Yeah. Huh. Okay. Well, why don't we get down to brass tacks here on the score predictions? Paige, I want to start with you. What's your score prediction?
Let's get it.
So even though my concernometer is an 8, I'm just going to roll. I'm going to roll with the trend, right? We beat this team handily every year. It worries me that we'll be dependent on some turnovers because it sounds like they're a pretty solid team if they can just hold on to the ball. So I'm going to go Ohio State. I'm going to say the Buckeyes 46, Nebraska 20.
Okay. That's really funny.
What did you say, Paige?
46-20.
46-20 Ohio State. Okay. Chad, how about you?
Wow. I'm going to say Buckeyes 47. The Corn Chuckers 17. Okay,
so 46-20 for Paige, 47-17 for CP. It's so funny. We're all like right around the same range. And I wrote this down before we started the call. 45-20 Ohio State. Nebraska is
they're boxing me in. What the hell? This is not the price right.
So, I mean, look, Nebraska's improved on defense, but and that's great. You're above average, but above average is not good enough, I don't believe. So I expect Ohio State to be able to do whatever it wants offensively in this game. And in fact, now that I'm talking about it, 45 seems a little light on the point total. I look for another big game out of Stroud. Ohio State has done a really great job of protecting him, even against Penn State. Not the best performance out of our offensive line, but Stroud was not sacked in that game, and I don't remember him being pressured all that much. So I like, I like Ohio State to protect Stroud. I like another big game out of him. I think he'll find, I expect a big game out of the wide receivers, and I think Trevion Henderson is going to give them another big performance. But you got to I think Buckeye fans are just going to have to take deep breaths and sit with, especially in the first half, some early success from Nebraska moving the ball, because they and they did this in last year's game. If you guys remember, on the ground, they were able to move the ball in between the 30s. And I think they'll probably be able to do that, especially with Steel Chambers sitting the first two quarters. But I think they'll make adjustments and they'll be a little bit better in the second half against the Nebraska offense and cover this one.
Are you typing up a quote there, Plummer? What are you doing?
Yeah, we can hear you typing there, CP.
I'm actually writing an article for the BDP, dude, about the BDP.
Hear you.
I'm putting in the.
You got a deadline, huh?
In the Belfry Daily Beast.
Excellent. All right. So, while there are some concerns, we do expect Ohio State to win, to win pretty comfortably, and then onward and upward
well, you see
to
what
Purdue.
I did there, Zach, right? That was like advanced South Stands podcasting, because I gave you a concern meter of 8, but a blowout score. So I really can't be wrong.
You can't exactly, but the ultimate hedge. Yeah. I love it.
I could just see Sloaner rolling his eyes right now.
All right. So real quick, there's one other game of interest I want to get your take on. And before we have just a quick peek at the initial college football rankings that came out on Tuesday, I just want to look at the top 6 or 8 teams. So we've got Michigan State coming off a huge win, one of the program's biggest wins, I would say, over Michigan last week, a 37-33 comeback win. Now, they were statistically dominated in that game. They trailed by 16 late in the third quarter in that game and still managed to come back and beat Michigan. And now they travel to West Lafayette to square off with a pesky Purdue team that, look, this is an above average Purdue team. They can do some things. They've got some players, David Bell, George Karloftis. We know they already handled a number two ranked team in Iowa earlier this year, even though none of us believed Iowa was that good. But, and as Ohio State fans, we know Purdue has spoiled many seasons for us previously. So I want to get your take on this game here. Paige, I want to start with you. Michigan State only a 3-point favorite on the road at Purdue. Who do you like in that game?
I'm still rolling with Sparty, man. I said it a few weeks ago. I think they're our toughest game. I think they'll be fine. I'm just looking at Purdue's schedule here, who they played. Nothing jumps out at me. Okay. I thought that was a great win by Sparty last weekend. So I think 3 is a gift, right? I think that's a reverse trap game. I think everybody are going to roll in there. It's going to be tough. I don't think so. I think Michigan State wins and wins easily.
I mentioned this on the South Stands Twitter page, that I thought this was a sneaky good test of Michigan State's readiness to be a contender, because these are the kind of games that you can't let rise up and bite you, right? Mm-hmm. Coming off a huge win. If you are a true contender, you got to keep the train rolling, right? And you got to steamroll, teams that are, Purdue's unranked. I know they've got some players, but this is a game, if you look at the rankings, that, if they are true number 3, sorry, I said number 2, Michigan State's actually number 3 in the playoff rankings. They're true number 3, then they should handle Purdue. Chad, how do you see this game? Who do you like in it?
Purdue's got some ballers on the defensive side of the
Yeah.
And Michigan State looks good. But I do like Mel Tucker, man. I think he's a great coach. And he's like, you look what they were supposed to be bottom feeders, man. He went out into the transfer portal, brought in some, good kids. He's got them all buying into the, the green. Although I do feel that this will be a short-lived stint up there in East Lansing for your old Mal. But I think.
Wait, why do you say that? Why do you say that? Do you think he's going to leave and take another job, or you just think?
Dude, I think he's taking LSU, man.
Wow. Okay.
I mean, I think I think he's going to leave for LSU. I mean, I'd like to see him stay there and just keep, building upon what he's got started. But I mean, look at him. He's like he went with Saban, where all 3 coaching places, and I just feel like he's an LSU. He just kind of fits that whole mold that he's a defensive mind coach, and he's got a lot more money down there with all the
That's true.
The backers, the alumni,
a lot more talent,
better facilities,
a
lot more talent, like a big talent pool to pick from.
Yeah.
But I think it's gonna be a close game. But I think Sparty pulls it out.
Okay.
Maybe by 6 or 7.
Okay, great. Yeah. So I'm looking at Sparty, and look, I'm very skeptical of Michigan State, and I said that during the telecast. The three of us are going back and forth over text during the game against Michigan State. And, they were statistically dominated in that game. And, they did take advantage of a few. I give them credit for they kept swinging and they kept fighting. My takeaway from that game was more about Harbaugh not being able to close the deal and finally get a signature moment, and yet another big game failure against a rival for Harbaugh. That was my big takeaway, much more so than what Michigan State achieved in this. All due respect to Kenneth Walker III and, to the rest of that team. But I'm looking at the results for Michigan State. Now, the week before, they barely escaped IU, right? A game at Bloomington against the Hoosiers, right? 2015 was the final in that one. They could have easily lost that game. They could have easily lost against Michigan. Probably should have, in my estimation. They played Nebraska earlier in the year. It was a 3-point game. They had to win that one in overtime. So they've had a lot of close calls. Michigan State has, and maybe they're just one of these teams on a magical run, and they just figure out ways to win. But I'd be worried about this game if I'm a Michigan State fan. I'm actually taking Purdue in this one by 3. Wouldn't even be surprised if it goes to overtime.
Wow, that's great. Now, I don't. You know what? I mean, we win pretty much, and we control our own destiny. But
for sure,
I would I'm always the big you guys know how I feel about this stuff, man. I want them to be undefeated when we play them in a couple weeks, man.
Yeah.
That'll keep them right there at that number 3. We have a decisive win over them.
Yeah.
But that's a good call though. I could see that happening. I mean,
the thing about Michigan State that worries me in a matchup with any team that can throw the ball and especially has a playmaker at receiver like David Bell, 127th in the country in pass defense. And they're in the 100s in total defense. I mean, this isn't even remotely close to any of the D'Antonio defenses that we remember there. So they're vulnerable on the back end big time. And, they made Cade McNamara look like John Elway last week. So that would be a concern for me in this matchup. I don't know that Purdue is a great matchup for them because of the way they can throw the ball, but we'll see. I'm going to tune in for that one. I think that's going to be a good football game.
Yeah, definitely.
All right. Well, hey, look, we're coming up on about 40 minutes. I'll get you guys out of here on this. College football rankings. The very first ones came out on Tuesday, the college football playoff rankings, sorry. And let's just have a quick look at the top 6. I want to get your opinions on what we saw on Tuesday in those rankings. Okay, no-brainer at the top, Georgia number 1. Alabama, that was a bit of a surprise for me. A surprise, but not surprised, right? At number 2. Michigan State, number 3. Oregon, number 4. I got no problem with that. Oregon's got the head-to-head over Ohio State, and they played a little better of late. The Buckeyes at number 5. Cincy at number 6. We got Michigan at number 7. Oklahoma at number 8, which I was a little surprised to see because I had them in my top 4. What did you think? Paige, did the committee get it right here with these first rankings?
So outside of Oklahoma, right, that's the only thing that is pretty shocking. Mm-hmm. This is these guys are politicians and they're setting up the TV show.
Right.
None of this. And the other thing is, sorry, Cincinnati, you're not making it. That's what this is telling you, right? Because they've got it set up perfectly. Georgia plays Alabama. Michigan State plays Ohio State. They know the winner of those games, right? If things play out sort of relatively as they should, it all settles itself, right?
Right.
Oregon in there, if they went out, they deserve to be in. I'm sorry, they do.
I agree. I agree.
Probably the best win in the country.
No question. Right? Oh, I think it is the best win. It's not even up for debate. Going on the road and beating Ohio State. Yeah.
So this is all they're just setting this up, right? So they don't get annihilated down the road. Cincinnati, that's the one thing. You're not going to make it. That's the only thing that this tells us. Outside of the Oklahoma, which is surprising. So in that realm, I think they did get it right.
Chad, how about you? What'd you think?
It's funny to me. That. I'm not quite sure who the committee chair is, but I listened to
Gary
him
Barta.
On. Yes, yeah. So I listened to his bullshit I think he was on like Danny Warfel and
right.
Hartzog, whatever his name is. And he was like, well, we really respect what Cincinnati has done. I mean, you can't you can't overlook the Notre Dame win, blah, blah, blah. Like, dude, just shut the fuck up, man. Like that, nobody, like they've got the people in Cincinnati have got voodoo dolls of you and they're just stabbing it profusely. You know what I mean? Like, just shut up. I feel bad for Cincinnati. Oklahoma kind of blows my mind a little bit too, but they're not that great, man. I mean, their defense year after year is the fucking weakest. Like, I don't understand what they can't put a defense together in Oklahoma.
I agree.
Georgia, obviously, their defense is great, and that's why I hope we get the opportunity to see our offense against their defense. I'm not too impressed with their offense. I mean, they've got some players, but of course, Saban's going to get in there somehow, one way or the other.
They've earned it. Alabama's earned it. They've earned the benefit of the doubt. Three championships during the playoff era, and that's just the way that it's going to be. As long as he's coaching there, they're going to get the benefit of the doubt. It just is what it is.
Right.
Yeah.
Now I made a prediction last week that Florida would cover the spread against the Bulldogs, but that didn't come to fruition. But I am going to say this right now, and that's going to happen. I truly believe this. I think Auburn is going to beat Alabama.
They're sitting right there. They're the committee's number 13, and Bama does look vulnerable. There's no question about it. This is I've been saying this for a couple of weeks. They are the most vulnerable team Nick Saban has had in the last 6 or 7 years, and that makes sense, given what they lost from last year. Yeah, I think the committee mostly got it right. That's fine. You want to put Alabama at number 2. Saban deserves the benefit of the doubt. That'll be settled on the field, right? Georgia and Alabama will have an opportunity to, kind of settle it on the field. If Bama gets that second loss, one would think that will eliminate them. Although if a 2-loss team is going to get in for the first time, right, it'll probably be Alabama. Got no problem with Oregon, ahead of Ohio State, as I said earlier. I can't listen to arguments for Cincinnati. I just can't. And, I was listening to Pat Forty and Stump for Cincinnati, and Stuart Mandel's been outraged over Cincinnati getting jobbed. And I just don't see it.
He's a Bearcat hater, man.
Yeah. No. Stuart Mandel is from the Cincinnati area. He's stumping for Cincinnati to get in. There's this outrage from some of these guys.
I'm saying you. I'm saying
me. Yeah.
Boy.
Yeah.
He's a Bearcat hater.
I didn't go to University of Cincinnati. I don't care about Cincinnati. I don't care that we have a former Buckeye coach. They're a big deal. We got Marcus Freeman's a coach at Notre Dame. Are we Notre Dame fans? No. So I don't. And they're in the way. Like they're in the way of my Buckeyes. So the other thing about Cincinnati, what's so compelling about them? What's so interesting? Like when you tune in to watch Cincinnati, do they have an otherworldly quarterback or an otherworldly defense or skill guys? They're ordinary. They're totally ordinary. I mean, they're good, they're solid, but there's nothing about them that makes me want to sit down and watch them or makes me feel like they belong in the field. I'm sorry. That's just the way I feel about them. And like the outrage over them, I'm like, look, when the field expands to 12, they'll get their opportunity to shut me up and prove me wrong. But in my opinion, they got no business in the top 4 for a number of different reasons. They don't play the schedule. They're not entertaining enough for me as a football fan. I want to be entertained. I want to see great athletes. I want to see explosive offense. I want to see dominant defense. They don't have any of that stuff. In my opinion.
I fucking love it, dude. He never gets fucking like he's always even killed, man. But you talk about fucking Cincinnati, dude. That's like
this game on, bro.
Yeah.
Oh yeah, dude.
I'm sorry. I don't get the outrage, but I understand. Like Ohioans root for Cincinnati because it's an Ohio school, and there's the connection to Fickell as the former defensive lineman and linebackers coach, and won a lot of games here as an assistant. And and a lot of people I think are probably viewing Fickell as the next man in line when and if Ryan Day moves on, which could very well happen. But for now, bye-bye Cincinnati.
Hallelujah. Love it.
All right. Well, hey guys, that was a great effort for a Thursday, Paige. I think I just heard you pop open a cold one. What are we, 2, 3? How far in are we?
That's number 3, buddy.
Number 3. I love it. Nicely done. Well done, sir.
Your money.
All right, boys. Well, hey, thanks so much for making the time. And let's try and do this again next week after what we hope is going to be another Ohio State win over Nebraska. been listening to the South Stands, a Buckeye football podcast. You can follow us on Twitter, Instagram, and Facebook, and visit our website at southstandsosu.com.